One of the most painful truths we'll ever have to swallow in relationships is that love on its own is not enough, and that's a hard thing to accept because we've been conditioned to believe that if you love someone, that should be the glue that holds it all together. But the reality is far more complex. You can love someone deeply, passionately, even unconditionally, and still not be compatible with them. You can crave their presence, miss them when they're gone, feel fireworks every time they enter the room, and still know in your quietest moments that something isn't aligning, that your values don't match, that your communication styles clash, that your emotional needs go unmet, no matter how many times you bring them up. And it's terrifying to admit that because love feels so rare. When you've found someone you connect with, someone who makes your heart race and your world feel full, the last thing you want to believe is that it might not be sustainable. But if you've ever stayed in a relationship long past its expiration date, you know this truth intimately. You know what it's like to convince yourself that if you just love them harder, if you're just more patient, more forgiving, more understanding, eventually the relationship will work. But the problem with that approach is that love becomes labor and not the kind that builds. It becomes damage control, it becomes a performance, it becomes a pattern of excusing behavior that makes you feel small just because you don't want to lose the feeling of connection. But what if the thing you're afraid of losing is only the illusion of security? What if the love you're clinging to is a highlight reel, not the full story? Because here's the truth. Compatibility shows up in the quiet moments. It shows up when you're navigating conflict, not when things are easy. It shows up when you're stressed, overwhelmed, or hurting, and you watch how the other person holds space for you, or doesn't. Compatibility means your lives move in the same direction. It means your growth is supported, not resented. It means your needs don't feel like burdens, and sometimes that kind of fit doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with calm. It comes with a sense of alignment. And when you've been addicted to chaos or intensity, calm can feel boring. But it's not boring, it's safe, and safe doesn't mean stagnant. Safe means solid, but we're not taught to look for that. We're taught to chase the rush, to crave the butterflies, to believe that if we're not hurting a little, it must not be real. So we ignore the signs. We ignore the gut feelings. We tell ourselves it's just a rough patch, even when the rough patch becomes the whole story. And then we wake up one day in a relationship that drains us, wondering where the love went. But maybe the love didn't go anywhere. Maybe it was never enough to begin with, because real relationships don't just survive on love. They survive on compatibility, respect, timing, emotional maturity, and shared vision. And if even one of those is off, no amount of love can carry the weight. It hurts to admit that, especially when you still love them, when you still see their good side, when you still remember how they made you feel in the beginning. But your relationship isn't happening in the past, it's happening now. And if now is filled with loneliness, confusion, or unmet needs, that's not love failing. It's reality speaking. You're not broken for walking away from someone you love. You're not weak for admitting that love isn't enough. You're brave, you're awake. You're finally honoring the part of you that's been whispering all along. You deserve more than just feelings. You deserve a future that works. And maybe that means letting go of someone you thought you'd hold on to forever. Maybe it means grieving the dream of what it could have been instead of clinging to what it never was. And yes, it'll hurt. It'll leave a hollow space in your heart, but that space isn't emptiness. It's room for something better, something that loves you back and fits into your life, someone who doesn't just light a fire in your heart, but walks beside you when the fire dims. Someone whose love is loud in action, not just words. That's what compatibility brings. It's not perfect, and it's not without effort, but it feels like peace. And if you've spent years mistaking chaos for passion, peace will feel foreign at first. But keep choosing it, keep moving toward it, because one day you'll look back and realize that the most loving thing you ever did for them and for yourself was to stop trying to make something fit that was never meant to. That's when love becomes wisdom. That's when heartbreak becomes healing. That's when you finally stop chasing what could have been and start building what actually can be. Attraction might be what draws two people together, but it's effort that keeps them from drifting apart. We fall in love with potential, someone's energy, charisma, the spark in their eyes, the confidence in their voice, but too often we forget that spark doesn't sustain itself, it fades when it's not fueled. And what no one tells you is this: effort is what keeps the fire alive. Not grand romantic gestures once a year, not passion that burns fast and disappears, but the small, consistent choices made daily. The check-ins, the curiosity, the intention to keep discovering each other even after the mystery has faded. Because the beginning of any relationship is a highlight reel. You're both on your best behavior, both trying to impress. But real relationships begin when the masks drop, when routines kick in, when life gets messy, and that's where attraction is truly tested. You see, people confuse initial chemistry with long-term compatibility. They think if the attraction was strong enough in the beginning, it'll carry the relationship forever. But real attraction isn't about novelty, it's about depth, it's about presence, it's about effort. And when that effort goes away, so does the desire, because attraction isn't just about how someone looks or talks. It's about how they show up for you emotionally. It's about how seen and valued you feel in their presence. When that fades, the connection does too, and what makes it worse is that people often think if they were truly the one, you wouldn't need to try so hard, that it would just flow, but that's a dangerous myth. Nothing worth keeping ever maintains itself on autopilot. The truth is, the most attractive people in relationships are the ones who keep choosing their partner, who don't take connection for granted. Who keep showing up with intention. That could mean remembering the little things they mentioned in passing. It could be staying curious when you've already heard their stories 100 times. It could be putting down your phone to look them in the eyes. These things sound small, but they create safety, and safety fuels attraction. Because it's hard to desire someone when you feel invisible. It's hard to want closeness when effort has been replaced by convenience. And what's tragic is that many relationships die slowly, not because the love disappears, but because the attention does. One partner stops trying, assuming the other will always be there. The compliments stop. The flirting stops, the appreciation disappears, and suddenly you're just two people sharing a schedule instead of a relationship. That's when the distance creeps in. That's when you start to miss something you can't quite name. And maybe you try to talk about it, but they say, "I'm just tired," or "Why are you making a big deal out of nothing?" And you start to wonder if it's you, if maybe you're asking for too much, but you're not. You're asking for connection, for presence, for the same kind of attention that built the relationship in the first place, and it's not selfish to want that, it's human, because love doesn't grow in silence. It doesn't grow in complacency, it grows when both people stay intentional. Attraction needs to be watered, it needs to be chosen again and again, especially on the days when it feels easier to check out. But not everyone understands that. Some people want the benefits of closeness without the responsibilities that come with it. They want you to still look at them like you did in the beginning, even though they've stopped doing the things that made you look that way. And if you bring it up, they get defensive instead of curious. They take your feedback as an attack, not an opportunity. And that's when you realize you're doing all the emotional labor just to keep the connection alive. But attraction is not a one-person job. If you're the only one trying, the only one initiating, the only one maintaining the energy, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, and eventually that performance becomes exhausting. You shouldn't have to convince someone to put in effort. You shouldn't have to remind them of your worth. The right person already knows, and more importantly, they show it, not just in the grand moments, but in the quiet ones. In the way they prioritize you, in the way they stay curious about your inner world, in the way they make you feel chosen, even on ordinary days, because that's what real effort looks like. It's not just showing up when things are exciting, it's staying present when things are familiar. It's keeping desire alive by remembering that attraction isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you rebuild every day together, and when you both do that, the spark doesn't just stay, it evolves. It deepens, it becomes something richer than the initial rush. It becomes the kind of attraction that doesn't just survive time, but thrives because of it. That's what makes love sustainable, not just chemistry, but commitment to never stop courting each other, even after the title is official. Especially then, one of the hardest yet most empowering truths you'll ever come to understand in relationships is this. People treat you the way you let them. That's not about blame, it's about boundaries. It's about recognizing that while you can't control someone else's behavior, you can absolutely control your standard for how you're willing to be treated. So many people stay stuck in relationships where they feel undervalued, overlooked, and disrespected, not because they don't know it's happening, but because somewhere deep down they've convinced themselves that asking for more will push the other person away. But what they don't realize is that by not asking, they've already lost something far more important than the relationship. They've lost themselves. Because when you tolerate being taken for granted, when you stay silent in the face of repeated disappointment, when you excuse behavior that hurts you because you don't want to rock the boat, you're sending a loud and clear message: this is okay. This is what I'll accept, and people, especially the wrong people, will take advantage of that, not always out of cruelty, but because you've never drawn a line. And here's the truth that no one likes to admit. People will always do what they're allowed to do. If someone constantly interrupts you, criticizes you, cancels on you, or emotionally withdraws every time you need connection, and you keep showing up like nothing happened, they will not change. Not because they can't, but because they don't have to. And if your silence is louder than your standards, you'll always find yourself in cycles where your needs are optional and your voice is muted. But it doesn't have to be this way. The moment you stop teaching people that you'll stay no matter how they treat you, everything shifts. You start to reclaim your power, not in loud ultimatums, but in calm clarity. You stop chasing someone's approval and start holding space for your own worth, and that scares people, especially the ones who are benefiting from your silence. The moment you raise your standards, you will be tested. Someone will call you too much, too sensitive, too demanding. But those are just words people use when they're not ready to rise, and your job is not to shrink yourself to fit their comfort. Your job is to grow into someone who no longer negotiates their value just to keep a relationship intact, because real love doesn't resent your boundaries, it respects them. It doesn't punish you for having standards, it meets them. And if someone walks away because you finally started honoring yourself, they were never really choosing you. They were choosing the version of you that let them get away with less than you deserve. And it's painful when that happens. You'll second guess yourself. You'll wonder if you should have just stayed quiet one more time. But you have to remind yourself, short-term discomfort is better than long-term resentment. The truth is, we often teach people how to love us by how we love ourselves. If you don't protect your peace, they won't either. If you don't take your emotions seriously, they'll minimize them too. If you don't walk away when you're being disrespected, they'll assume they can keep disrespecting you. Not because you're weak, but because you're giving them the manual and they're reading it line by line. So rewrite it. Don't explain your worth. Embody it. Don't keep giving second chances to people who see your forgiveness as a license to keep hurting you. Be kind, yes, be compassionate always, but stop confusing kindness with tolerance for mistreatment. Because if you're always the one adjusting, always the one bending, always the one making excuses, you're not in a relationship, you're in a dynamic built on imbalance. And balance doesn't come from demanding perfection. It comes from mutual respect. It comes from both people being willing to grow, to listen, to show up. And if you're the only one trying to protect the connection, you're not being loved. You're being used. It doesn't matter how charming someone is when they're sorry, how sweet they can be when things are good. The real measure of a relationship is what happens when you assert a boundary. Do they get defensive or curious? Do they retaliate or reflect? Do they punish you or step up? That's when you see the truth. And sometimes the truth is that you've outgrown someone who was never willing to grow with you, and that hurts. But what hurts more is staying small for someone who benefits from your silence. You deserve a relationship where you don't have to keep proving that your needs are valid, where being treated well isn't a reward for good behavior, it's the baseline. And that starts with you, because the way you treat yourself, what you tolerate, what you allow, what you speak up for, that sets the tone for everything else. So start there, not with trying to change them, but with deciding what you will and will not accept moving forward. Because people treat you the way you let them, and when you finally raise your standard, the wrong ones will fall away and the right ones will rise to meet you. You can meet the right person at the wrong time and it won't work. Not because the connection isn't real, not because the feelings aren't strong, but because timing is the silent force in every relationship that either amplifies love or suffocates it. And it's not just about age or career stage, it's about emotional readiness. It's about whether someone has done the inner work to be available, present, and capable of showing up in the way a healthy relationship requires. We romanticize love as this unstoppable force that conquers everything, but the truth is, love without timing is like trying to light a fire in the rain. No matter how much spark there is, the environment keeps putting it out. And we try to deny this. We think if it's real, it should overcome everything. But often, what we mistake for fate is just chemistry, and what we hope is destiny is just bad timing dressed in passion. We meet someone and feel everything click, we laugh, we connect, we open up, and yet it still falls apart. Not because we didn't care, but because one or both of us were still carrying baggage we hadn't unpacked. Maybe one person was still healing from a past wound. Maybe one was too focused on proving themselves in their career. Maybe one was terrified of vulnerability and love felt too dangerous to hold, and so we blame ourselves. We ask what we could have done differently. We try to bend, to wait, to hold space for someone who simply wasn't ready. But the most painful truth in love is this: readiness is not something you can create for someone else. It's something they have to step into themselves. You can't love someone into emotional maturity. You can't wait someone into self-awareness. You can't sacrifice your needs in the hope that time will change their capacity. Timing matters because relationships require two people arriving at the same place at the same time with the same willingness to build. If one person is halfway in and the other is carrying the weight of both hearts, it will always feel like a struggle. It will always feel unbalanced, and we confuse this with passion. We think the push and pull means it must be meaningful, but sometimes the most chaotic relationships are just a symptom of bad timing trying to force a connection into a container it's not ready for. You deserve someone who's not still deciding if they're ready for love. Someone who isn't still battling ghosts you didn't create. Someone who's done the work to know who they are so they can meet you without projecting their past onto your present. And if that's not where they're at, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just makes them the wrong person right now, and right now is everything. Timing determines whether love feels safe or stressful. It determines whether you're building or surviving. It shapes the tone of your entire connection. That's why walking away from someone who feels perfect, but whose life is not aligned with yours right now, isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's knowing that love should not feel like you're constantly fighting just to stay afloat. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go of someone who isn't ready, even if they have every other quality you've been searching for. Because you deserve a love that doesn't ask you to wait for it to become real. You deserve someone who's ready when you are, who meets you with clarity, not confusion, who shows up not in pieces but whole. And if that person isn't here yet, trust that timing is still working on your behalf. Sometimes the delay is divine. Sometimes it's saving you from a heartbreak you're not meant to carry. And sometimes it's giving someone the space to grow into the version of themselves that's actually capable of loving you the way you deserve. But you can't build your life around maybe. You can't pause your growth waiting for someone else to catch up. You have to live, you have to choose people who are ready now, who choose you now, because anything less will only leave you feeling like you're not enough, when really it was never about you. It was about where they were in their own journey. Timing isn't everything, but without it, everything else can fall apart, so honor it. Don't ignore the red flags because the chemistry feels intoxicating. Don't let potential blind you to the reality of what's happening. Ask yourself not just who they are, but when they are. Are they ready now? Are they healing now? Are they choosing now? Because if the answer is no, it doesn't matter how great the story sounds in your head. Love has to be mutual, balanced, and present, and that starts with both people arriving fully, not eventually, now. There is a kind of pain that doesn't come from being abandoned or mistreated, but from loving someone who refuses to grow. You see their potential, you see the person they could be, and it breaks your heart to watch them sabotage their own life or your relationship over and over again. So you try, you stay, you explain, you defend them to your friends, to yourself, to your own sanity. You tell yourself that if you just love them a little more, if you're a little more patient, if you hold on just a little longer, they'll finally see what you see, but they don't, and they won't. Not because they're incapable of changing, but because change requires willingness, and you can't force someone to be ready for growth just because you're ready for it. You can offer someone every tool, every truth, every opportunity to be better, and still watch them choose comfort over transformation. That's not your failure, that's their choice. And the moment you realize that, something in you shifts. You start to see that what you thought was love was often codependency in disguise, that your role became less about connection and more about caretaking, that you weren't building a future together, you were babysitting someone's potential. And here's the brutal truth: potential is just a possibility, not a promise. It's not your job to drag someone across the finish line of their own maturity. You can inspire growth, but you cannot manufacture it. You can support someone's healing, but you cannot do their healing for them. And the more you try, the more you drain yourself dry, until there's nothing left of you except a version of someone who's constantly fixing, pleading, and shrinking. The relationship becomes a project, not a partnership. You start sacrificing your standards in the name of compassion. You start tolerating emotional laziness because you're afraid of giving up on someone. But what you're really giving up on is yourself. Every time you excuse bad behavior, every time you justify their lack of effort, every time you pretend things are fine when your soul knows they're not, you lose a piece of your own voice. And you can't thrive in a relationship that silences you. Growth is not about perfection. It's not about having it all figured out, but it is about willingness. It's about someone being humble enough to admit when they've hurt you. It's about someone doing the uncomfortable work of self-reflection. It's about someone actually showing up, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. And if they can't do that, if they don't want to do that, no amount of love from you will make them ready. You are not a rehabilitation center for emotionally unavailable people. You are not a therapist for someone who refuses to acknowledge their own issues. And you are not responsible for teaching a grown adult how to care. The moment you realize this, you begin to reclaim your worth, because staying with someone who doesn't want to grow is a slow erosion of your spirit. You start doubting your expectations. You start questioning your boundaries. You start wondering if maybe asking for honesty, consistency, or emotional presence is asking too much. It's not. It never was. But when someone can't rise to meet you, they'll try to pull you down and convince you that down is where love lives. Don't fall for that. Don't stay loyal to someone's potential longer than they're willing to stay committed to their growth. Love should elevate, not exhaust. A healthy relationship challenges you to become more of yourself, not less. And the right person won't be threatened by your standards. They'll rise to meet them. They'll want to grow with you, not because you begged them to, but because they value the relationship enough to evolve. And if that's not happening, if you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting while they stay stagnant, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance, playing the role of savior while secretly becoming the one who's drowning. And the cruelest part, they may never change, not because they can't, but because your presence makes it easy not to. Sometimes your love becomes the reason they don't have to grow, because they know you'll stay. They know you'll forgive. They know you'll carry the emotional weight for both of you. And until you decide you're done being the emotional anchor, they have no reason to move. So move for yourself. Walk away, not to punish them, but to protect your peace. Because you deserve someone who's not just capable of growing, but wants to. Someone who meets you with self-awareness, humility, and effort. Someone who doesn't need to be fixed, because they've already chosen to work on themselves. Let that be the standard, not potential, not hope, not what they could be one day, but who they are choosing to be today.